We'd like to get started, and I'd like to invite the Maplewood Middle School Student Council to come up and to lead us in the salute to the flag. Guys, want to stand around here. We'll catch you on the film, and then we'll... Yeah, so come around the front of this table. Come around here. Come around the front, all the way around.
Please be careful of the wires.
Yep. And then we're going to obviously face
Come
the
on
flag.
in, move it together, don't be shy.
The producer. That's right.
Hi.
You're going to start us off.
Is that everybody?
Start us off, go.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. You may be seated. Pursuant to Section 5, Chapter 231, Public Laws of 1975, this is to state for the record that adequate notice of this meeting has been provided to the public by posting and maintaining the annual notice of regular meetings on the bulletin board of the municipal building, by mailing the annual notice of regular meetings for 2020 to the News Record and Star Ledger in December 2019, and by filing said notice in the office of the Township Clerk.
Mr. Adams? Here. Mr. Daffis?
Here.
Mr. DeLuca?
Here.
Mr. Lindbrick?
Here.
Mayor McGeehee.
Here.
Whereas Chapter 231, Public Laws of 1975, commonly known as the Open Public Meetings Act, requires all meetings of public bodies be open to the public. And whereas Section 7A provides that the governing body has the discretion to permit, prohibit, or regulate the active participation of the public in any meeting. And whereas desire the governing body to comply with the provision of this act, same time it conduct its business in an orderly and expeditious manner, now therefore be resolved by the Township Committee, the Township of Maplewood, does hereby prohibit, except as set forth in the formal agenda, active participation in the deliberations of the governing body by the public, except as otherwise prescribed by law, does limit the public to observation of discussions and actions of the governing body at its regular and special meetings.
So moved. Second.
Mr. Adams? Yes. Mr. Daffis?
Yes.
Mr. DeLuca?
Yes.
Mr. Lindbrick?
Yes.
Mayor McGeehee.
Yes, and thank you, Ms. Fritzen. Good evening and welcome to our second Township Committee meeting in February. I will briefly go through our agenda for this evening. We will first start off with a proclamation for the MMS MLK Peace March. Then we will go to two board and committee appointments for the Green Team and the Senior Advisory Committee. We will then have our first public comment on agenda items only. At that point, when that is concluded, we will have our only ordinance, which is on final for tonight, is the ordinance to amend the classification of township employee positions. After that, we will hear from department heads. Our CFO will provide his budget report. Then we'll have our administrative reports by our township clerk, our township administrator, and our township attorney. Then we will hear from the elected officials providing their reports on standing committees and other important issues. Tonight we have 7 discussion items. Please note that number 6 has now been stricken from the agenda, but we will talk about the 2020 budget in its current draft form. We will look at 2 draft ordinances related to sustainability, including disposable food serviceware and also reusable food and beverage accessories. We will then look at a revision of our plastic bag ordinance. Our 5th discussion item is going to be regarding fees related to rental registration inspections. And then we will look at some proposed increase to towing fees, which came out of our public safety meeting. And then finally, we'll discuss future recycling plan. In our consent agenda, we have a total of 7 items. We will look at the hours of our Maplewood tax assessor, authorize payments to several police officers. We will also do approving of emergency temporary appropriations. We will then move on to our authorization of a refund of a tax overpayment, bills and claims, and then finally the appointment of a part-time police health nurse. Part-time public health nurse, excuse me. We'll then have public comment on any subject item, and then we will adjourn. So we have a pretty good agenda for this evening, and without further ado, we'll move forward with the proclamation. If I can ask the faculty, the staff, the teachers, and all of my MMS participants to please step forward. Thank you. Gather around, please. Absolutely.
So you can be on this side too.
Yeah, it's definitely. Come on in. Come on in. Renal, come on in. Yeah, come on in. Come close. Awesome. Perfect. All right. So this is a proclamation in appreciation of the Maplewood Middle School Michelle Turner MLK Silent Peace March, its 20th anniversary. Whereas the Maplewood Middle School Michelle Turner MLK Silent Peace March recognizes Dr. King's life commitment to fight nonviolently for equality and peace, to promote social justice, and to speak out against discrimination and hate. And whereas in the late 1980s, former MMS teacher team leader Rich Moss initiated the march as a small team-based event of 100 students in conjunction with the beginnings of the national holiday. And whereas in 1998, former MMS teacher team leader Craig Reiner expanded the event to include the entire grade level. And whereas in January 2000, MMS teacher team leader Rich Palmgren believed that the experience could be expanded to include all students and staff of MMS and developed the logistics to accomplish the inclusive event. And whereas in 2011, the march was rechristened the Michelle Turner MLK Silent Peace March to honor Michelle Turner, a former MMS staff member, Maplewood parent, advisor to MLK Club, and human rights advocate who lost her battle with cancer in the fall of 2010. And whereas through the years, nearly 900 students, faculty, and staff have annually marched in silence in rain, snow, and sub-zero wind chills. And whereas the students display signs bearing messages of peace and unity along with quotes from Dr. King, and afterwards assemble at the entrance of the middle school, to recite the Pledge of Allegiance and sing, "We Shall Overcome." And whereas the march is part of an overarching program for the day, which includes watching Dr. King's I Have a Dream speech to spark conversations about the work of civil rights leaders in the past and how youth can make a difference. Therefore, let it be resolved that I, Mayor Frank McGehee, and the Township Committee of the Township of Maplewood wish to express their appreciation to the teachers, administration of the Maplewood Middle School, and the students, both past and present, and to the family of Michelle Turner on the occasion of the 20th anniversary of the Maplewood Middle School Michelle Turner MLK Silent Peace March, an MMS commitment to honor Dr. King's message and those who marched for peace and equality in the past, and in silence to remind us all how much more work still needs to be done. Thank you, congratulations. And I want to give you a chance to say something. I just want to say personally, as a former MMS student, that this, for me, is one of the most moving events of the year in all of Maplewood. Just watching the students and having a chance to participate, it always chokes me up. And I have to be honest with that. But please, Mr. Palmer, please some words.
The march has become one of the most important programs that MMS can actually do. The students every single year are completely silent. When we initially started this, the town and the parents and the administration said it couldn't be done. We couldn't keep 900 kids quiet for up to 45 minutes outside. But every single year, for 20 years, the students have shown us that they can step up, they can be serious, they can create slogans and signs that will express Dr. King's continued dream. And they can be silent, and they can show the commitment to peace and equality and unity that Dr. King put forth for all of us. I am only a small part of this. I do the logistics, but it's really the students who step up and represent this community and their belief in the country and equality. So thank you.
We're going to take a quick picture in the front right quick. And I brought this is the sign that one of the young ladies gave me when I marched this past January.
I must be getting old. My son was good friends with Eddie Turner, Michelle Turner. Played at my house many times. And they marched in the first one of these, so it was great.
Okay, we're now on agenda item number 6, which is board and committee appointments. I'd like to ask Brandon Edling to come forward, please. So Brandon, if you can introduce yourself to the committee and let everyone know why you're interested in being part of the Green Team.
Sure. Thank you. Good evening, Mr. Mayor and members of the Township Committee. My name is Brandon Edling. I reside at 19 William Street here in Maplewood. My family and I have been Maplewood residents for the past 7 years. Recently, I had an opportunity to attend a Green Team meeting, and I'm excited to learn about the work they've done in Maplewood and feel the committee is a great fit for my interests and talents. My family and I have long been conscious of the impact we're having on the environment and are always looking for ways to reduce our carbon footprint. Like hundreds of others in Maplewood, we recycle, but we're also beginning to compost and reduce waste in other ways. For example, my wife makes cloth napkins and works part-time for Good Bottle, part of the new general store co-op on Springfield Avenue. I'm a video producer, trainer, and content creator for Dropbox, and I believe my skill set are a great fit for the Green Team. Even at the first meeting that I referred to a minute ago, we came up with a few projects of which I can be of assistance. I welcome any questions you may have now or in the future. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you. Any questions from Mr. Edling?
I do want to invite you to the Zero Waste Charrette that we're holding on Friday, February 28th. The members of the Green Team are all invited. So, yeah, we're trying to we won't get to zero waste, at least not in my lifetime probably, but we can get closer, right?
That's right.
Yeah, thank you for that.
Thank you so much for that.
Any other questions for Mr. Edling? Nope. I would say that, yes, you have jumped in right away. I was at that Green Team meeting, and you said, I could do this, and we're like, you're the person for the opportunity. And you're already making great strides in helping us move forward with our initiatives, so thank you for that. And with that, I would like to make a motion that we approve the appointment of Brandon Edling onto the Green Team.
I second it.
Any discussion? Please call the roll, Ms. Whitson.
Sams?
Yes.
Mr. Daffis?
Yes.
Mr. DeLuca?
Yes.
Mr. Lembrick?
Yes.
Mayor McGee?
Yes, congratulations.
Thank you.
Thank you. We have another appointment for this evening for the Senior Advisory Committee, Mr. Daffis.
Thank you, Mayor. We invite Sydney Larrier to come up to the podium. Welcome, Sydney. Please introduce yourself and tell us about your interest to serve on the Senior Advisory Committee.
Hello, my name is Sydney Larrier. I've lived in Maplewood my entire life, so 23 years. I live at 68 Midland Boulevard. And when I think of why I wanted to join, I've lived here my entire life. I've worked for Maplewood Kids Camp, and in both that capacity and just being a Maplewood resident, I've seen how much effort seniors in Maplewood put into making the lives of younger people in Maplewood as good as they are, from really little to young adults like me. And I would like to give back and also become more knowledgeable about, the lives of everyone in Maplewood. So if you have any further questions.
That's terrific, and I see Mama Larrier is in the back there looking on proudly. And I should say not only Mama Larrier, but former Township Committee member Larrier, and also very recognized statewide, not only senior, but also healthcare, senior advocacy advocate rather, but also healthcare advocate. India Larrier is with us tonight. You have huge shoes to fill, Sydney. You think you can handle it?
I do.
Well, we welcome you, and I move that you be appointed to the Senior Advisory Committee.
Second.
Any discussion? Please call the roll.
Ms. Adams?
Yes.
Mr. Daffis?
Yes.
Mr. DeLuca?
Yes.
Mr. Lundberg?
Yes.
Mayor McGee.
Yes, congratulations.
Thank you.
Okay, we're now on to agenda item number 7, public comment. I see that our county representative is here, so I'd like to ask her to approach.
Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
I'm Keisha Burnett, your township liaison from Essex County. I brought with me a box regarding the census, and I have posters that I'd like you to post everywhere in the town, and I also have little flyers. I want you to stress that everyone is to be counted. All of the information is confidential. If you need them in other languages, please let me know. I'll have them delivered. This was a heavy box tonight. I think I have English and Spanish, but I know we have them in other languages as well. If you need us to come out, do a presentation, I'm here to do that. But we want everyone to be counted because we want to get the money that we need for the services so that we can do what we need to do because we're in public service. So that's all I have to say regarding the census. I also want you to know I'm also the acting division head for what is formerly known as welfare, which is the Division of Family Assistance and Benefits. And we will be having a press conference shortly to introduce and give a tour of our new location, which is going to be at 321 University Avenue. And the press conference is supposed to be sometime next month. We're going to be opening the doors to the public June 1st.
That's great.
Great, terrific. Thank you. So just so you know that we are definitely moving forward. We have a Census Complete Count Committee we put in for the grant.
Yes, I know. Thank you for that. I'm very happy.
No worries. And any lip that you have, because we've been working with someone at uscensus.gov, Ms. Brown, to get information, because we want to have some literature that says the census is coming at least for the next month, and then we want to convert quickly over to our own customized census data. And we'll be doing several events. We've been doing events already. We've been part of several Black History Month events, from the MLK Day at the high school on the 20th of January through the movie we showed right here a couple of Fridays ago. And we'll be involved in more Black History Month events, Women's History Month events, and we'll be doing we'll be at the train on March 19th. And we have an email campaign that we've established as well. So we have a lot going on.
So if someone can email me all of those events, I will make sure that there's a representative, if not from the county, it'll be the county, my office, and we'll have a table. We'll even take applications if necessary for assistance, for food stamps, and whatever they need. So just let me know, and I'll have someone at these events.
Okay, sounds good. Yeah, we have our Keystone, our tent event is going to be on April 4th at the Hart Community Center, but we'll see that information, and we look forward to having you part of the team.
No problem.
Awesome.
Ms. Burnett, I wanted to follow up on that. Is the county sponsoring any mobile units to assist some of our seniors and other vulnerable populations to help them with the census, especially considering that there is a digital divide and there might be some folks who may not have access to the internet and so on and so forth?
At this current time, I can't answer that question, but I will by the end of the week.
Okay, because we will be doing what we can do here. We will have mobile units at various locations throughout the township to do that, to walk people through, having personnel with tablets to help people actually fill it out in real time. But we're wondering if there were countywide, efforts to assist other communities nearby. Most notably, I'm thinking of Newark, I'm thinking of Irvington, I'm thinking of East Orange, where we have a lot of populations that historically have not been counted.
So what I will do is I will inquire at our meeting this week, and I'll send you an email by Friday.
Terrific.
Perfect. Thank you. So we'll include you now moving forward our census emails, and you're more than welcome, or someone to represent you can come to our next meeting.
Okay,
So,
fine.
thank you so much. Any other questions? No?
So the box is over there.
Okay, we will. We got you. Awesome. Okay, any other public comments at this point? Anyone wants to address the Township Committee? Seeing no one, will move forward with agenda item number 8. We have an ordinance on final passage.
Mr. Mayor, ordinance number 2985-20, An ordinance to further amend classification of employment positions within the Township of Maplewood and to establish salary ranges for employees.
This ordinance has been published, copies posted on the bulletin board of the municipal building, and copies made available to the general public in accordance with the law. Is there anyone who would like to speak on this ordinance? Seeing no one, we will close the public hearing. Can I get a motion?
I move this ordinance be adopted as a whole and the clerk be directed to publish the same as a passed ordinance in the Maplewood South Orange News Record according to law.
I'll second it. Any discussion? Seeing none, Ms. Preston, please call the roll.
Ms. Adams?
Yes.
Mr. Daffis?
Yes.
Mr. DeLuca?
Yes.
Mr. Lembrick?
Yes.
Mayor McGee?
Yes, thank you, Ms. Fritzen. We're now on agenda item number 9. This is our CFO's budget report. Any questions on the report at this point from the committee? Nope. No. None? None?
It was a very thorough report. Thank you. We did actually read it.
I read it, yeah. No, we appreciate, understanding the difference between the 44 and 33% on expense items. I think that was a key point in understanding that anything that exceeded the 100 threshold that we will discuss in our consent agenda. So thank you for that, Mr. Kaloche. Okay. All right, we'll move on now to administrative reports. Trying to mix it up a little bit here. We will hear from Ms. Fritzen.
Okay, Mayor. So the first thing I just wanted to report to the Township Committee, and I made sure you all had a copy, was the notice to bidders, the advertisement for the plenary retail consumption liquor license. And if you have any questions, at this point we'd be waiting for, the bids in March. And but everything's been covered by law that was required and requested. The other item I have is about the new voting machines, which we anticipate in Maplewood for the June primary. And I don't have much more to say because I think there'll be a training class even for the clerks, in addition, of course, to the board workers. So the only other thing I wanted to report was we're busy with people that want to make a party declaration, that maybe have not made a party declaration in the past for voting in June, and there's still plenty of time for that. And you can make a party declaration if you have not or are not on record through April 8th. That's it, Mayor.
Thank you, Ms. Fritzen. Any questions for Ms. Fritzen?
I have a question about the liquor license. I know you sent an email about with locations of where that was being advertised, but there were some that were open, I thought, that you weren't sure, or somebody else was supposed to follow up on where that, like NJ Biz, for example.
Okay. I think I did report there was a 9% overhead in using Unibid. And at this point, it's been advertised in the Maplewood South Orange News Record, the Star Ledger, TAP, Village Green, and the Patch. So I did not go any further than those venues.
I think we should, if we could advertise it in places like NJ Biz. That's where real estate developers in the state will be looking for it. They won't look in the News Record. They won't look in. It's not in the Star Ledger either?
Oh, it is.
Oh, it is. Okay, I missed that one. I did mention it at the board meeting, the Downtown New Jersey board meeting I had last Friday, to one developer who's interested and going to ask around, maybe interested to pocket, possibly. So, but I think we need to get it in the commercial real estate community, or that's who would be buying it more than likely. So can we do that?
Okay.
Good point. I agree, Ms. Adams. Thank you.
Yeah.
It was also sent to both SIDs.
What was that, Ms. Fritzen?
It was also sent to both SIDs, Springfield Avenue, and for notification, Maplewood Village as well.
Great. Thank you. Any more questions for Ms. Fritzen? Thank you, Ms. Fritzen. Ms. Viveros.
Thank you, Mayor.
had one report. I had sent a follow-up memo to the Township Committee regarding the dental benefits plan. Part of the overall looking at savings, health obviously is one of them, and we were approached by our risk manager regarding a Delta Dental. Currently, we have Horizon Blue Shield, who provides our dental plan for township employees. If anyone has any questions regarding what the plan entails, I described the costings. There is a savings overall, and the second year would be a cap. We were trying to negotiate that, but we are promised there would be a cap, so the second year there wouldn't be an increase. If anyone has any questions, I do have to go through before we start the application process.
Okay. Any questions? Do we have to negotiate these with the bargaining units, or can we unilaterally do it?
We don't. I looked at specifically, the PBA had their own dental plan. I don't know how that came about, but it is our prerogative to change the dental plan at any point. State health benefits, we would have some negotiating to do, but not the dental, so.
Any other questions for Mr. Veros on this topic?
Not on this topic.
Okay. Do you have more to report?
That was it. That's all I had.
Thank you. Mr. Daffy.
Mr. Veros, do you have an update on the Wi-Fi project, maybe through Assistant Township Administrator Michalowski or yourself?
Hi, Glenn Michalowski, Assistant Township Administrator. I reported on the capital Wi-Fi project at the last meeting. Currently, we're exploring two alternatives to the antenna location. Mr. Desiderio and our vendor are negotiating and corresponding back and forth with American Tower Corporation, who owns our cell tower in the DPW lot. I'm awaiting a response from them. And simultaneously, I had a site survey with an electrical company to look at putting a utility pole in the DPW yard. It would be a 70-foot pole. And that's our alternative plan if we don't have any luck with American Tower Corporation.
And can you explain why you had to go through that route?
Initially, we were working with Maplewood Crossing, which is a residential multi-apartment building behind the DPW yard. The height would have given us line of sight with the original antenna location, which would have given us the best coverage for the network, but they no longer want to partner with us for the project, so we're exploring alternatives.
And are we all squared away with the school district's participation?
We're going back and forth with the language of the MOU, but the MOU has been drafted, and they're just hammering out the particulars of that.
Terrific. Thank you.
Any additional questions regarding the administrative report? Thank you, Mr. Veros. Mr. Desiderio, sir.
I have no report, Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Desiderio. Okay, moving on now to agenda item number 11, reports from elected officials. Ms. Adams.
Just one thing, as I mentioned before, the zero waste charrette. I've been working with a few other municipalities along with Zero Waste USA to organize a workshop, a one-day workshop. Those of us on the planning committee will be meeting the following day for a couple hours for takeaways and marching orders, if you will. We've invited, I know Mr. DeLuca invited the joint meeting. We're inviting administrative and elected officials from South Orange, from Summit, and from Melbourne, and obviously Maplewood. So we're hoping to, these are experts in the field. They're coming from California and Boston, and they'll be presenting a lot of information on the very complicated issue of waste disposal, both recycling and composting, and looking for ways for us to figure out how we can at least adapt some of those practices to try to address the very difficult problem of not only getting rid of waste, but the enormous cost that is coming with it. So that's all I have.
Do you expect it to be
sold out or fully?
Oh, I'm sorry, I should have told you when it was. It's Friday, February 28th, from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. It's mostly by invitation, it's not really open to the public. A few other municipalities were invited as well, just to send somebody. But we really want to get sort of the municipalities that have been participating in the planning, and then we can grow it from there. The cost of it is really, to us, is just some hosting, expenses, bringing in some, lunch, sandwiches, things like that. We're encouraging everyone to attend, to bring their own bottles, and we'll supply pitchers of water and things like that. So Lisa Minardi and Missy Mancuso have been really helpful in getting that organized. So it'll be in the parlor at the Woodland from 10 to 4 on the Friday the 28th.
Thank you, Ms. Adams.
Yeah.
Mr. DeLuca.
I have 3 items, thank you. First, we're just about midway in Black History Month, and we've had just a whole bunch of really, really good programs, oversubscribed programs. Yesterday, we had a concert at the Woodland. We had to put out 2 racks of chairs after putting out the first rack. And people just kept coming and coming and coming, so it was really great. And we still have 2.5 more weeks of activities. There's a concert tonight, a concert tomorrow night. The Hilton Neighborhood Association is Thursday night, and then we have a whole nother weekend, and then the following weekend. So we'll keep pushing out information. I'd like to put the 4th of July on next meeting's agenda, discussion agenda, and I'll have some information. We're essentially moving forward on what we said. The town will run it. We'll keep the components of the past with the bike parade in the morning, the kid races, hopefully the baking contest, ice cream eating contest, and then we'll have fireworks in the evening. So I will have information for you at the next meeting as see who's willing to volunteer with various organizations. And then the last thing I wanted to just report on, irrespective of our own problems with energy aggregation, Ms. DePalma and I went to Monmouth County last week and spoke to a number of Monmouth County towns about doing energy aggregation and our experiences here and bringing together various groups. The upshot is there's now about 5 to 7 Monmouth County towns that are looking to model after us and come together and set up an aggregation group. So once again, we're in the forefront of sustainability and moving these kinds of items. So,
thank you, Mr. DeLuca. And we look forward to that July 4th conversation in March. Mr. Lindberg.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have 2 items. Both are coming out of the Public Safety Committee. The first is a crime update through the first 6 weeks or so of the year. Crime is flat in the major areas, but 2 areas where we are substantially down are in robbery and burglary, where we're down 50%. In both categories. The only area where we are up is larceny, where we're up 55%, and Chief Duvall reports that is largely due to package thefts from packages that are delivered to people's homes, left outside, and there's people who target that, who drive around and look to take those packages before the occupants have a chance to bring them inside. So what he asked us to communicate to the public, which we will do tonight, and also by email and other means of getting out the word to residents, that just be cautious when you're getting deliveries, whether from Amazon, UPS, FedEx. If you know you're getting a delivery, you may want to instruct them to bring it around back, to put it somewhere that maybe isn't visible from the street, to reschedule delivery for a time when someone will be home, to ask that it be left with a neighbor. If you know the neighbor will be home, or to make some alternate arrangement, because having packages left out in plain view from the street is unfortunately in this day and age an invitation for theft, and we're seeing that. It was up around the holidays, and I think we had hoped that it was just sort of the holiday rush, so to speak, but that has continued to be a trend that the MPD has seen through the first several weeks of the new year. So please be cautious when having those packages delivered, because we are seeing a rash of those thefts, and several of them also, I'm pleased to report, actually have been resolved because residents have had Ring cameras or other kinds of cameras, and were actually able to get video images, first to identify people quickly, and second to be able to identify the individuals who took them and provide that information to police, which can be helpful. But the most important thing is not to be a victim in the first place, so wanted to get that out there for the public. The second item is our new Project Medicine Dropbox. The police department, working with our township health department, has put a Project Medicine Dropbox in the lobby of the Maplewood Police Department at 1618 Springfield Avenue. Project Medicine Drop is a program that allows residents a safe and secure way to dispose of unwanted and unused medications, so they don't wind up in household garbage, aren't flushed into the water supply, and certainly aren't used by people who they're not intended for, including children. This program in the Dropbox is completely anonymous. It's available to the public 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. You can drop off both prescription and over-the-counter medications, whether they be in pill or capsule form, patches, inhalers. So the only thing it can't take is medical waste, syringes, or any type of liquid. There was a launch of the Dropbox last Friday for Valentine's Day. I believe Mayor McGehee attended. And the chief wanted to recognize Detective Sergeant Paul Marizzi and members of the Community Services Bureau for spearheading this effort. So I would encourage anyone who's looking to dispose of unwanted and unused medications to do so anytime at their convenience in the lobby of our police department at 1618 Springfield Avenue. And I thank the police department and the health department for bringing this to Maplewood. And that is my report. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Limbrick. Mr. Daffis.
Thank you, Mayor. I have 4 items out of 2 committees: Code Enforcement, Community Development, and Public Safety. The first quick item is an update on the long-term facilities improvement and enhancement of our schools and our school district. We have learned that, as it turns out, Maplewood will be reviewing the construction of its own schools during that process, only our own schools. We are continuing to draft an appropriate updated house numbering ordinance in Maplewood. We have heard from public safety personnel, fire, most notably fire, that it is very hard to see the numbers of houses. They're not very visible from the street, especially at night. And we are working on an ordinance that would be appropriate to sort of tackle that. And this would be something that would apply to properties going forward, and we would do an education campaign on the ground to encourage existing properties to make updates as appropriate. We are also, we will be speaking with Mr. Desiderio at our next code enforcement meeting about updating our skateboarding ordinance. We have heard from some of our students, especially our middle schoolers who are skateboarders, about their experiences in town being harassed by residents and sometimes by law enforcement, and we are trying to find the right balance to build some equity here, but also always number one priority, make sure that public safety is our number one priority. And we are working on that. We did we did discuss it already in one round at code enforcement, and we discussed perhaps taking out the list of all of the streets that are named in the ordinance where one cannot skateboard in town, effectively causing the skateboarding ordinance to be a ban on skateboarding in town. There's so many streets attached. We took that recommendation to public safety. We heard from our chief of police, who had no objections to that clause, but made certain recommendations, and basically making sure that we are treating skateboarders the same as cyclists and others, therefore obeying the rules of the road. And I will update and get more into details about that once we have an ordinance for introduction, which we hope to bring to the full committee in the second meeting in March, Mayor. And the last thing I want to inform the public about, there's some misinformation out there that our juvenile restorative justice program is dead. It's not dead. It's very much alive and thriving and doing well. Our juvenile restorative justice program is essentially a station house diversion initiative where we go out of our way to make sure that youth involved in certain minor offenses do not go through the criminal justice system. They are diverted, not being arrested, into community outreach and working with their parents and working with other stakeholders to make sure that we can help them and keep the community safe as well. And we've helped about 15 teenagers thus far, and the program is up and running. I don't know where that rumor came from. And that is my report.
Thank you, Mr. Daffis. I have 3 items coming out of our standing committee meeting for communications. We had a good conversation with a potential partner to look at our website and enhance some of its navigation, enhance some of the communications that are on it. So look at it as 2.0, if you will. Our goal is to really do a deeper dive with their help to determine if there are some opportunities to enhance the navigation, as well as some of the ability to get information, say 1 or 2 clicks away, versus some of the challenges we've had currently with the structure of it itself. For Black History Month, I just want to mention that I'm doing my second reading discussion this Sunday on the 23rd of February. We had a pretty strong audience for Michelle Alexander's book, which is The New Jim Crow, and this book will be The Nickel Boys, which is a novel, which is less, it's an interesting novel, but I'd love for anyone to come out. That's 2:30 this Sunday at our public library at Hilton Branch. And then our census meeting was a very robust meeting we had last Thursday. We covered several items. Just want to give you a couple highlights. One is that we will be pushing out a media blitz in the coming weeks, which will include Facebook posts over the week of March 3rd and the week of March 10th. We will have links on our town website to push our census. We also will be doing what we call a press tour with the Village Green, Tap Into, and a news record, just really going after those who have been undercounted traditionally. We will continue to attend upcoming events, including tomorrow night, the 1619 discussion at the Woodland. The Midwood Chamber of Commerce has joined us in partnership, and they're having an event where we'll be present next Wednesday on the 26th at 8 a.m. at St. James Gate. At Women's History Month, we will be at the March 15th event honoring women's voting rights, and then also we have a train station event coming up on Thursday, March 19th. Look for some collateral in addition to what we've received already from the county to be coming out shortly.
which will be inclusive of Maplewood-centric communications in that flyer, and also our big event, which is the Hart Community Center Kickoff Parade on the 4th of April. Also, our SIDS are also joined us and will be doing work in March, and we've also continued to talk with neighborhood associations. We already talked to Board and Park, and we are also talking with House of Worship to get speaking time over the weekend at those respective venues. And that is my report, so we will move on now at this
Can I
point
just add one question on the communication with the website? Have you talked about creating an app?
So we did have a conversation about creating the app. We actually sat down and talked with an individual about it. We thought that the app would be a step away from getting people to do the fulfillment of the actual information when the letter comes out. So we
No,
decided.
I'm sorry, I don't mean an app, I mean the app for the website, not the census.
Oh, so we did not talk about an app for our town website.
Okay.
You're talking about the census. I
Yeah,
thought.
no,
Okay.
I'm sorry, I meant an app for the town.
Yeah, we did not discuss that with this particular partner.
It came up at an Arts Council meeting back in December. There's some interest on, seeing if we could put together an app, so I just share that with you.
No, we appreciate that. I mean, the partner that we just had preliminary conversations with, I believe that these individuals could do something, look into that.
Isn't our website mobile-friendly?
Our website is mobile-friendly, but the previous vendor that we did have, which was Civic Plus, bought out our current vendor. We're on the more limited version, but Civic Plus does have their own app, so it's included at an additional price. It's nominal, so if that's something that we're exploring, we can certainly convert it into an actual app versus just mobile-friendly. It was very functional, I have to admit. Most of our hits came from the app when we looked at the data before we moved to the new vendor, so.
One of the conversations we had with this partner is looking at how we can enhance what we currently do on the Civic Plus platform, and then if they were to take over after that contract ended, what they could provide us. So we'll still have those conversations.
What we would have to do logistically is put an RFP together.
Right.
With some of those wants and needs, and then we could go from there.
Understood. Yeah. Thank you. Any other questions? No? Okay. All right, moving on to agenda item number 12, our discussion items. Mr. Veros and Mr. Koloje. Come on up. We will now discuss draft of the 2020 budget.
I just wanted to let you know that there was a paper that, a few pages that were passed around. Those lay out the last tab of where the tax rate is going to land based on the scenario of the budget, the current draft budget. What Mr. Kalouje did for you all is provide you with various scenarios and options that you could explore given what some of the drivers were. So I'll let Mr. Kalouje explain exactly where we are and
So
what our
the
recommendations.
single page we had received before is incomplete, and what we just received is the complete version.
What you received, first page, is the actual last page of the tax rate and what the drivers are, and where we would land if we didn't have those
Oh, I
drivers
see.
right at the
I
end.
see. I
And then
see.
the following pages are the different options
Got it.
that we could explore.
Okay. Thank you.
And if I just may add, before we continue the conversation, Ms. Viveros asked me to prepare this because some people, like myself, are visual learners, and it's easier to see stuff rather than hear it in order to process it. But option number 5, and I need to stress that option number 5 is for illustrative purposes only, and is not an actual recommendation coming from administration to do something as draconian or dramatic as that fifth option. However, the fifth option was included in order to illustrate the challenges that we're facing with our current budget and the pressures the upward pressures that we are seeing on the tax rate, and some of the crazy things that would need to be done if we wanted to come in flat. So with that in mind, and again, so that we're not looking at any of these in an angry or panicked mode, option number 5 is not an actual realistic proposal. So just to make sure that we're all, I'd like to be able to go home to my wife and kids tonight as opposed to getting beat up by the Township Committee for such a crazy proposal. So it's not something that's realistic. I'm not sure how we want to proceed at this point. Do you want to go through these options? Do you want to discuss the budget first?
So let's do this. Since the bulk of the work that we reviewed was the original option before you put the options together, which was the .852, let's just go through that. And then we can talk about the options at that point. So we're going to start at a top line, which everyone received on Friday and reviewed, and then once you understand what Mr. Kaloje, Mr. Veros are telling us, then we can look at the options that would, theoretically, all the options, one or a combination will reduce this. But this is, let's start here.
So we're looking at the tax impact slide?
We're using this.
Okay.
Yeah, it is, it looks like.
The first page, yeah.
Very first
Okay,
page.
so we're in the hard copy. Okay.
Right, in 2020, of course. Mr. Kaloje.
So the very first page that we would be looking at is essentially just historical data that shows us where we were in 2018, where we were in 2019 after we made some very difficult decisions coming out of what was a bad 2018 to 2019 transition. And then 2020 as the budget has currently been put together based on 2 work sessions. The bottom part of the page essentially spells out what are the major drivers for pushing up the need to increase the tax levy, and then includes towards the bottom what could have, would have, should have been, for lack of a better description, had those drivers not been present. One of the items that's not on here that I just heard this evening is that if we open bids in March for a liquor license, and we plan on awarding that bid this year, and we plan on getting paid for that bid this year, we would be able to anticipate that revenue, which would offset any tax levies. I know that we considered a liquor license last year. For whatever reasons, it didn't happen for us. So if we think it's going to work, certainly the way we're rolling out the budget with its introduction and its adoption, bid openings in March would leave us enough room to put that into our budget for this year, or certainly to extend our budget hearing and amend our budget in order to get it in before we made a final adoption. So to be clear, $350,000 as a minimum bid would roughly equate to reducing the tax rate by a penny.
We'll take it. So Mr. Kaloje, just in terms of the narrative here, for all my colleagues, when we see the valuation gain and loss, you have it at basically flat at about $30,000.
Yes.
So understanding that, I know that evaluations went up $10 million for residents this year, but then we lost about the same. Is that my understanding due to appeal settlements for commercial?
That is correct, Mayor. Mr. Galante had said that roughly $10.2 million that we had received in additional assessments based on permits, people putting in additions to their house, new bathrooms, that sort of thing. But then we had some major commercial tax appeals that pretty much sucked up all that we were putting onto the books and took it back off the books. So our net loss was roughly $30,000 from the year before. So for all intents and purposes, our valuation is flat, correct.
Does everybody understand that?
Mm-hmm. Yes. Mr. Kaloje, would you mind reading into the record the 2020 budget drivers?
Certainly, Deputy Mayor. So the 2020 drivers are additional funding that we placed in for the 4th of July celebration. We need to budget for it. If we wind up getting offsetting revenue, obviously that would be something that would then roll over into fund balance the following year. But nonetheless, if we plan on spending money, we need to have the budget reflect that. We have 2 major increases in both our PBA and SOA contract and our FMBA contracts. There were some significant concessions that were received. However, nothing doesn't come without a price tag, and this was the price tag to get those long-term structural savings in those union contracts. We are anticipating an increase in outsourced labor attorney fees, given some of the situations we're dealing with. That has recently been reduced by our administrator, and so the driver is now only at $60,000. Our liability insurance costs are reflective of our actual bill. Our workers' compensation insurance is reflective of our actual bill. The increase in recycling costs is based on the contract that was awarded at the last TC meeting. And then the down payment for capital projects reflects the fact that we're going from roughly $4 million last year in projects to $7.2 million this year in projects.
So, Mr. Kaloje, looking at these drivers, the contracts, which accumulatively is $543,000, is about 47% of these appropriation, and then the insurance costs I have at 22%. So between those two, that's 70% of the drivers.
Yes.
Okay. And then the contracts, these are negotiated what, every 3-4 years. What is that, Mr.
4 years.
Every 4 years. So it's like coming at us at this time.
Is there an explanation for the almost $200,000 increase in workers' comp?
I'm getting a actual report on the individual losses, but it really takes one, and there's one in particular that was significant enough that drove this number up.
The other issue that we were facing with workers' comp is starting in 2017 and continued to 2018, we artificially held down what we were being charged in workers' comp by hitting our trust fund for workers' comp, to the point where our workers' comp fund is now somewhere around $600 or $700.
Mr. Kaloje, I have some questions about the fast revenue figures that you provided to us. This was in Ms. Viveros' email last week. So you have a number of revenue projections for 2020 that are below the actuals for 2019.
Yes.
For example, the fine cost municipal court, we had budgeted $457,000 last year. We brought in $640,000, and this year you have $608,000. So, and you've highlighted all those differences in green of the 219 that. So, if I remember correctly, when we were talking, we could go up to these numbers. You used a 95% figure to get to the 2020?
Yes.
That's correct.
And why would we not want to use the 100% in almost all of these categories?
So from a best practices perspective, you typically do not want to anticipate revenue at 100%, particularly if you wind up then in any given year, it winds up being a bad year and you only collected 98%. You're now running a deficit in the balanced budget that you had created. Last year, desperate times called for desperate measures, and in order to offset what was a very large increase, we anticipated fully that we were going to use 100% of that revenue. We were blessed with a year that it exceeded our expectations and created the ability to still anticipate higher numbers in revenue, but by going back to a best practice of creating that 5% difference. Last year's budget was built on trying to create fund balance through appropriations. This year's budget is being created for a fund balance through revenue instead. Fund balance is an item that we have on our revenue sheet that shows us as surplus anticipated. You will see that there's an increase this year over last year of almost $500,000 or $500,000. That was generated through the fact that we were able to do a little better than we had hoped. As the administrator told us to tighten our belts, department heads tightened their belts, and that's what drove that ability. If we were, on the revenue side, able to realize the full 100% despite the fact that we only budgeted for 5%, we would see that entire amount be put into next year's budget under surplus anticipated.
So I understand that. I understand the best practice 95% as opposed to 100%, but it seems to me that as I was looking at these numbers, it's pretty close to a tax point, $380,000.
Would be a penny on the rate, correct.
Right. So for every, unless we get to $386,500, it doesn't make any sense to make any cuts. because if you come in at a half, any kind of percentage tax, it always goes up. So you need to come in, we need to cut like $400,000 or find new money in $400,000. So I would like for us, maybe not to go to 100%, but maybe 95 is a little too conservative. Because, you know, some of these numbers are recurring. We have a very strong jitney revenue source. Our courts, we're doing a lot more with our Traffic Enforcement Bureau. And I know that's not the primary goal, but it's a result of it. So I think there's an opportunity to maybe take a look at some of these numbers. In addition, because even what you have here on page 2 and 3 are not easy things for us to adopt.
I would certainly agree with that, and at the end of our budget process, the bottom line is that it is the TC's budget. And so if you, as a collective whole, decide that this is what you would like to do, we would certainly execute that without question.
So what I would suggest maybe is that, and I think you had spoken, Ms. Navarro had spoken to me about this, is having a finance committee meeting between tonight and the next time we talk about this, and maybe we can go over line by line some of these revenue numbers and see if we can tighten up some of those expectations in addition to what you're proposing here. Because even if we adopt all these things, it's still, you know, an increase.
Yes. And to that point, Mr. DeLuca, on the expense side, knowing that we had brief conversations about 2 of these options, maybe 3 of these options, I would eliminate option 4 and 5 at this point and the cumulative effect, and I would just do a scenario on the expense side where we already have option 1, 2, and 3, but that would do 1 and 2, 2 and 3, 1 and 3, and then all 5, which is $554,000. So we look at 4 additional scenarios. So we have the 1, 2, and 3, and now we bundle them into pairs. So 1 and 3, 2 and 3, and 1 and 3, and then we cumulatively do those 3 and eliminate option 4 and 5 out. Does that make sense? And then we look at that on the expense side, and then to Mr. Luca's point, we look at the revenue on the revenue side, which will take us from 98% to whatever, 98, 99, whatever we decide, and then get that information out before our next meeting in a couple of days for sure, and have that lens where we have 7 layers from an expense side, and then we have 2 layers from a revenue side, and we pair it up and see what makes sense.
So eliminating 4 and 5.
Eliminate 4 and 5, and then if you add on your sheet, you could write, so you have 1, 2, and 3, and then you'd put 1 and 2, 2 and 3, I got it, 1 and 3, and then a cumulative of 1 to 3, because those are the 3 potential cuts that make sense. The other 4 and 5 don't make sense.
Right, so, before we have Mr. Kaloje do that, is there sort of a consensus among us that we would be willing to entertain 1, 2, and/or 3?
Fair question. For discussion, me, yes, I would entertain all 3, or a combination of such, but open to discussion.
Okay. Because as much as the number is scary, I don't like any of the options. So with the understanding that I'm just one vote, I'm just putting out there that I'm probably a no on 1, 2, and 3 also. So I just wanted to, before we had Mr. Kaloje run numbers, I just wanted to sort of get a sense of, am I in the minority, or, if there's a majority that already feels like, let's say, number 3 is not something the majority would consider, then maybe we don't have them run the numbers on that.
Well, and to be fair, maybe Mr. Kaloje can give a little more definition, because I do understand a little more about these 3 options. Maybe you could provide the dais a definition of these 3 options.
Yeah, walk us through them, which I think is what you were going to do anyway, but we got veered off.
So why don't you go ahead and do that first, in terms of explaining the 3 options from Mr. Lindbergh and our colleagues.
So one of the things that I discussed with our administrator is option number 1. She had suggested that we look, and this option would be similar to what Mr. DeLuca had spoken about in terms of adjusting revenue in order to lower the tax levy. And so in this particular case, we would be utilizing capital surplus or the fund balance as a revenue source. We currently have a balance in it of $179,000, so we certainly could apply $179,000 as anticipated revenue into our budget. But the concerns of that would be that it would eliminate our ability to do anything that would be pay-as-you-go projects that were non-anticipated or were smaller projects, and it would also affect our participatory budgeting because that's how we funded it last year, and that's how we're planning on funding it again this year. So if we're looking at $50,000 for a participatory budget, and we wanted to keep that in our budget, then we would really be looking at $129 as available to drain the fund balance in capital.
So to that point, let's make it 129.
Option number two.
I'm sorry, just to be clear on this capital, this is the capital surplus. This is not unappropriated capital balances from project. We haven't eliminated any balances from capital projects. And do you have a sense of what that totals?
We passed a resolution that totaled $1.2 million. The auditors just began doing the work on confirmation to determine how much of that was actual money that was borrowed, which we can then anticipate as a revenue source for a reserve for debt service. So currently, out of the $1.2 million, we have identified $500,000 that can be utilized as a revenue source, and it is in this budget as a revenue source. It can potentially go up to $1.2 million. Realistically, that's probably not going to be the case, but it might land somewhere in between, which would be an option instead of cutting from the appropriation side, just adding to the revenue side in order to draw down the tax levy.
So which is different than capital surplus?
Yes, correct.
So we have another capital opportunity, and that is looking at unappropriated capital or unspent capital projects.
Correct.
And we're not going to know that until the auditor's done?
The auditors just turned over all our books on all the work that we did to them on Friday. Spoke with Mr. Pascal this morning. He's planning on coming in sometime end of this week. We will continue those discussions. We believe that by the end of the following week or the end of the month, we will have completed confirming our AFS numbers, and then we'll be able to look at revenue numbers with a more solid footing. Option number two moves over onto the appropriation side of the budget, and it recommends cutting the entire accumulated leave budget. Last year we had $125,000. We expended all of it. A large portion of that was for retirement settlements that were agreed upon, and the payout was over multiple years. We have continued to use this line item in order to pay out additional retirements on any employees that are leaving us during the year. If we eliminated this a line item, we would be forced to hit salary and wages in order to fund that. That would create a delay in hiring. That would also create some pressure, depending on how we were hiring new people, as to whether or not we would need to find money at the end of the year in order to compensate for that. Most towns have this line item in their budget. Most towns also have a trust fund, which we do not have set up. So that typically, as an example, if we had $125,000 in accumulated leave in our operating budget, and in any given year, or that particular year, we only spent $100,000, we would lapse $25,000 into this trust fund. And eventually we would build up the trust fund so that if we decided to eliminate it entirely in this particular year, we wouldn't have the exposure of not having the ability to pay for any retirements that came up during the year. So this is certainly an item that we can cut and kind of close our eyes and hope it goes well. This is also an item similar to what we did on the first item that we can reduce and hope for the best. But again, it's a policy decision on whether or not this governing body wishes to even create a trust fund. If there's no interest in creating a trust fund, my recommendation would be to leave the number at 125. If we are looking to create a trust fund, then reducing that line item and hoping that we have something left over at the end of the year to start funding that trust would be my recommendation.
Mr. Kaloje, a question on this applies equally to option 1 and option 2. you put the numbers here, whether it be 179 or 129 in the first and 125 in the second. That's sort of assuming we max that number. We could do something incremental, right?
Yes.
We could not spend all the capital surplus, or we could not cut the full appropriation for community leave. We could do something, if we're sort of, adding all these things together, particularly as Mr. DeLuca suggested, with maybe changing some of the proposed revenues to be, closer to 100% versus 95 of the 2019 realized. We could sort of mix and match these, right? And we wouldn't have to necessarily go to 100% on anything.
That is correct, Mr. Lembrick. I was tasked with coming up with what we would look like if we had a flat increase. And so the first four, again, are viable. The fifth option was strictly illustrative to show us what we would need to do to come in flat. Obviously, we take great pride in our public library, and no one really is going to consider that option seriously.
Okay, and before you get to options number 3 and 4, would it be, assuming, none of us are in favor of 5, so for 3 and 4, are those also things where we could sort of do partially, or are those things that we either do it all or do it 0?
No, all of these can be done partially, and while we're discussing option 2 with the accumulated leave, bear in mind that tonight we have 2 resolutions on for 2 people who have retired and are going to be paid out what they're owed contractually. That money will hit this line item. There is already money in that line item in our temporary budget, so realistically, even if we were to try and do the full amount, it would be probably somewhere around 118.
Okay.
So just to be clear on this, if we had to pay somebody some kind of separation payment, it could come out of another line item, that would be the salary
Yes,
and
typically if
wages.
this line item did not exist, that we would take it from salary and wages.
Because we had the money in there, it could affect, the ability to, as you say, we have to have a little gap between we hire
There would need to
another
be a little
person.
gap, correct.
And then historically, I was just trying to find out how much we had appropriated for that line item outside of last year. I see 125 from...
On accumulated leave, it's a relatively new item, and it was based on some settlements and some agreements that were made somewhere in 2016. So that's when it popped up. It was significantly higher in that very first year. I'm assuming there must have been more than one individual for a number to come in.
Well, in 2017, we had at least one very large one.
Correct.
And it would appear that you probably had several.
Option 3, please.
So option 3 is also on the appropriation side. This is the amount that we budgeted for the capital increase that we did on the sewer fee. When we did an analysis of whether we were going to join in on the joint meetings bond or just give them the full payment ourselves, the analysis was that if we did the full payment ourselves and paid down the note over the course of 3 years, it would generate a savings in terms of interest as opposed to what we would have done had we gone in with everybody else. Eliminating this line item would obviously eat into the savings that we had calculated from the prior year. It would also go against what we had decided as a policy a year ago when we changed the ordinance to add this fee for 3 years. So it's certainly not something we're recommending doing. However, it is something that is within our jurisdiction to do if we so chose.
But this is what we charged the $31 extra for. So we went out to the community and told them they're going to have to spend extra because they're going to be paying this off. So I'm not sure how we can then go and not pay it off.
I would agree with that statement. However, from a strict budgeting standpoint, it is an option that the TC would be able to consider.
Right. Okay.
So what about, and we know what's coming down the pike with regard to sewer, so it doesn't really make sense for us to stop this payment. No pun intended. Sorry, Mr. Lemon.
Sorry, I'm 11 years old, I apologize.
He was already there, yes. I would agree with that assessment.
Yeah, I mean, we're just going to bury ourselves even more if we were to yeah. Sorry, not flushing.
Yes, so...
This is why I could never be on the joint meeting. I would just laugh my way through every meeting.
So, Mr. Peroge, taking into consideration your definition of these options and the responses from my colleagues, are we comfortable revising and where you would put together one more scenario looking at option 1 and 2, knowing that there is a lever to the point that Mr. DeLuca, Mr. Limbrick said, where we can look at percentages, knowing that the cap would be the 125 for 118 for number 2, and then the 129 for option 1, taking into consideration 50K for the budget and then the payments out for the 2 individuals.
And Mr. Mayor, just to sort of, maybe revise my comment from earlier, I would say I'm a definite no on 3, 4, and 5 overall. Yep. And on 1 and 2, I could see taking part. I wouldn't be in favor of doing the whole thing, but I would be in favor of maybe revising those down a bit.
Right.
Yeah, I think that's where we are.
And, so looking at whether we could, between pulling levers 1 and 2 and also the revenue lever that Mr. DeLuca talked about of maybe bringing the 22 proposed closer to the 2019 realized, close to 100% as opposed to 95%. Maybe between those sort of 3 levers, we can get to a less ugly number.
No, agreed. I think at this point with the discussion that our caps on option 1, option 2 have now decreased, and we can look at percentages from that 118 cap on option 2 and that 129 cap on option 1. And then on the revenue side, we have a variance between 95 and 100, so we could look at 98. I mean, I know it's work, but we look at it maybe as a basis point up and see what makes sense.
And, and Mr. Hu, I don't know what your number was, but when I did the sort of the rough calculation of difference between the green numbers, the 2019 realized, the 20 proposed, I got to about 318,000. So not quite a tax point, but I mean, close enough that, even if we don't do the full thing, if we did a little bit of 1 and 2 and the revenue sort of getting closer to the 2019 realized, I think we could get to that tax point that we're looking for.
Well, closer, but not exactly, yeah.
Well, I mean, closer to cutting 1 tax point,
Right. Yeah.
and having an increase that would be less
Draconian. Burdensome.
Yeah.
Any other discussion on the operating expenses and revenue?
One other question. The Finance Committee recommended that we increase the sewer fee to cover the $1.2 million. $60 this year and $60 next year. Does that play into this at all? Or is that just going to be used next year to pay off?
No, that absolutely would play into it. So if the decision is made to increase the revenue that comes from the sewer line, it would increase our budget. Based on the way the state looks at budgets, we would need to show the documentation that we passed an ordinance that increased that fee, but if we did that, they would allow us to anticipate more than we collected in the previous year, because we would demonstrate that we have XYZ number of users, and we changed the fee to ABC.
So we'll talk about that in finance and then bring that back as part of our whatever recommendation we come back with.
And Mr. Kaloje, let's say from the sale of the liquor license, we were able to anticipate, something above $329,000. I mean, that would be, in theory, that would be another tax point?
That would be the skies opening and choirs of angels singing, yes, sir.
Tell me what you mean by that.
Meaning be able to anticipate that as revenue, and that would be, let's say we get lucky and we get $500,000 for that license, it would be a tax point and a half that we'd be able to...
Sure, but in terms of what, we would have to, we'll have to tell them what we're anticipating before we actually sell the license, right?
$350 minimum.
Yeah.
We have a minimum of $350.
Right. So we could project the 350 is what you're saying.
We can only project the 350 if we anticipate actually awarding it, and if we are going to realize the revenue by the end of the year.
Right.
So if we're not going to get the license out until November, and we're not going to see the money until January of next year, then we would not be...
No, they have to close. They have to close. But
we could amend the budget.
yes, yes, correct. But the tax point is $386,500. The valuation is...
Oh, yeah, well, right. Okay, so, yeah, I was using municipal tax, but, so 386.5, So 350 wouldn't be quite a tax point, but again, it would be close enough that with a little bit of a adjustment on some of the hot and cold levers, we could get there.
Yes. Yeah, that's correct.
Because if we could find 2 tax points, that would be, through the combination of these things, I think that would be a big relief.
Agreed. Mr. Kaloja, do you have any questions about what we discussed this evening and what our next steps are?
No, I've got my notes and my homework assignment, Mayor, and I look forward to the Finance Committee meeting to vet it and bring it back to the full committee.
Okay. We will definitely set that meeting up in short order and give you some time to do your homework, and then we will go from there. So the next part of this discussion, we'll move over to capital. Okay. Ms. Viveros, do you want to lead us through here at this point?
Sure. Somewhere here. I might have switched my papers around, I apologize.
No worries.
There were just some minor adjustments, one of them being in the capital request number 3. We eliminated the security cameras, which were approximately $100,000. That's already in my budget, but it's not necessarily $100,000. It's about $35,000 cost. We also removed the OEM generator, which is a $50,000 cost to that. So that brought down that number 3 to $985,000. Okay, and the second one was number 4 for Midland Boulevard. We had a conversation about it, how we could perhaps phase this out into two parts, and so we reduced that to $600,000 this year. We wanted to make sure that it was okay to do that with the grant, being that this is a grant awarded project, and that was okay. So $600,000, and then next year in 2021 we would then have that balance there. So that reduced that, and then just make sure. Cooling tower, caterpillar, painting. We did remove the bathroom repairs over at DPW. That was number 7 in the DPW.
What line?
It's number 7 under DPW.
It's page 5.
Page 5, right, thank you. And that is part of the overall funds being allocated for the DPW underground storage.
Okay. Got it.
And I believe that was what we had.
There was 70,000 was added to the sewer for emergency. What was that about? Add 70,000 to include separate emergency. I think.
Yes, I'm sorry about that. That was because of some of the emergency work that needed to be completed, and we didn't have enough coverage for that.
There's in the library, it's 20 under the library. Seems to be an error there because we have 43,000 for the technology and 75,000 for the library consultant, and the total is 43,000. Seems to be a mathematical error.
Right. The correct.
The 75,000 that's in this capital budget can be removed because the TC...
No, it's a separate.
This is an additional 75,000?
Yeah, two
To what we already have in there in the balance for the mobility costs. This is for the consultant. This is part of the application, correct?
No, the other thing was the
That was the
application. This
application.
is the
Right, so
mobility.
that's where we found money for that. But
So
this
there's
is
just a mathematical error. I don't know if it changes the bottom line.
Right.
Yeah, let's just run it really quick, and then, because that would change the 30% reduction from initial recommendations to our final recommendations. And would also impact the down payment as well.
Right.
Yeah, no, totally, yeah.
Couple of dollars. Every dollar counts.
What is the situation on the leasing of vehicles, Public Works line number 1? That doesn't seem to have any conclusion there.
We did provide a narrative previously, and Mr. Kolodziej went over that regarding the pros and cons of doing the leasing and the financing, and we figured that the actual financing was a better financially to do rather than
Purchasing it and financing.
Right, I understand.
Yes.
That I remember during the budget hearing, but you have a recommendation of 320, I gotta scroll back down again.
I think the wording on there needs to change
Right,
instead
it
of
shouldn't be
saying
leasing.
leasing. It's not actual leasing.
Right, isn't this the dump truck?
The two dump trucks.
Two dump trucks.
Okay, so that's why I'm confused, because it still says leasing, plus it's, the recommendation is like $50,000 more than the cost. You have 320,000?
No, that 320,000 is for two trucks.
Right, but the cost, in the cost column says 276.
Okay, that's an incorrect, it's actually...
So how much is it?
320,
320.
And you added the jitney bus.
yes.
Mr. Kolodziej, did you add up the recommendations right now? Just trying to see where we are net.
If you can read out the numbers to me.
I'll read it out. We'll start off with engineering. The first one is $1 million for the road construction to the TPW storage tank. It's 1.11. Number 3, 985. Number 4, Midland, 600,000. 5, 200,000. Boyden Avenue sanitary sewer, that's 1.2. Various environmental improvements, 50,000.
I thought it was 1.270.
1.270.
Yes, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, can we go back to...
I'm sorry, 1270. Yeah.
Just, okay.
Can we also go back to Midland Boulevard? I just have a question about that, because the note isn't clear to me. So the grant is a one-time grant for $475,000?
Yes.
So, and we're splitting, the Finance Committee recommended splitting the project in two. So what does that mean? So that means next year we have to budget a full $600,000.
Right.
So we won't be getting any more grants for that, right?
No, we would apply for a grant for the other half in the following year. We can only apply for so much per year per grant.
Right.
So by splitting up the project and asking for half of it this year, and we're now pretty much earmarking what our grant's going to be, request is going to be for next year, which would be to finish this project on the other side.
Okay. Okay, go ahead.
Where did we leave off?
You were on line
You left
6.
No, he's
I'm assuming that we left off with this...
50,000, did you put that in there?
No, I don't have 50,000.
So 50,000?
Okay.
Okay. And you put in the 1.170, okay. Various road improvements, 45,000. Traffic calming, 353,000. In-house engineering, 175,000. Fresco site development, 115,000. Maplewood Pool, we don't need that. The GIS aerial update, that's 120,000. Fire department backup turnout gear, $30,100. Rescue equipment, $35,000. Forcible door entry simulator, $7,000. Police department, Purchase of police vehicles, these are specifically for SUVs, $70,000. Purchase of computers, $60,000. Building improvements, $61,000. Server upgrade, $26,000. Water fountain upgrade, $12,030. Then we move on to Public Works, and that's $320,000. Cooling tower, $37,500. Caterpillar, $15,130. Painting of the woodland, $12,789. Repair tennis courts at Walter Park, $35,000. Mini split, $8,000. Fence install Memorial Park, that's $30,753. Painting of the Civic House, $11,089. Jitney bus, $130,000. Town hall cameras, security system, $31,773. Live streaming platform, $50,000. IT life cycle, $36,000. Library technology, $43,000. Library consultant, $75,000. Those, and that's it.
Ms. Rivera, a question on, I'm on line 56, the library subtotal. I'm seeing 118, 136, 67, but then I'm seeing a total of 43, 136, 67.
We just talked about that, yeah.
They left out the 75,000
Okay.
total.
All right.
So according to the calculation, we're actually under the 7 million, we're at 6.6, so there's an error here, so we...
Yeah, so you guys are going to have to run these.
Yeah, we have to run
I
these.
think I was slightly off of your number. Let's just run it back and then, and fix the numbers. And then also just tweak some of the narrative that Ms. Adams mentioned about the jitneys. Just to make sure that the narrative is right. And then we'll review it a final time in the beginning of March. And in fact, if we have any questions for Mr. Kaloje or Ms. Veros, we could provide them before the meeting, and then we can kind of have a final run through. So maybe we could look at it mid next week.
I'll send out a proposal for a meeting date.
Yeah, so finance, and then once we look at it, then I think if we can get this to the committee a week ahead, so that 25th, I think it is, that Tuesday, then that will give everyone until, say, Thursday to put their questions in, and then give you Friday to get it, and then on Monday, we'll see the final walkthrough on Tuesday the 3rd. Okay. Great, thank you. Any other questions? No? Okay, great, thank you. Moving on to discussion item number 2, draft ordinance, Ms. Adams.
Oh, hold on.
No worries. We have a pile of papers in front of us that we have to...
Yeah.
My calculator was like, I have it way above, which is in, but whatever. We got to do it over anyway. Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Kaloje.
Okay, so Mr. Desiderio and I worked on the 2 ordinances regarding regulation of polystyrene foam, disposable food serviceware, and added packaging materials to that. The next one was ordinance regulating the use of certain non-reusable food and beverage accessories. So this was circulated last week with corrections and additions and changes that Mr. Desiderio and I discussed. So I guess I'll just open it up rather than go through everything for you guys to let me know if you have any questions or concerns about anything.
Can we talk about them separately?
Yeah, absolutely.
So, you pick which first.
Okay.
Which one is it? It's the...
The first one is the polystyrene foam.
Okay.
So Ms. Azles had one question. It's under
the definition of expanded polystyrene EPS. I guess my question is, what are the different types? Because I was reading the definition, which had some in Hoboken in there. I just wanted to understand like the different types.
Basically, what we did was sort of combine the Hoboken and Summit ones to include every possible styrofoam, polystyrene thing that we could think of, and we left the example of the trademark styrofoam by Dow Chemical in there just for elucidating what it is, to make it clear.
Okay, so cool. So then what we'll need, so I guess we'll have to have, when we do the education part, we'll have to have different examples of these.
Well, they're all basically the same kind of thing. They're basically just styrofoam packaging, all the things we
Sizes,
call
colors,
styrofoam.
Okay.
They're just technically, different compounds, chemical names that I don't really know.
Yeah, I was reading these definitions.
I know it's you know it when you see it, like pornography. I woke Mr. Lembrick up.
Yeah, that was my only question, was about the education part here, and also knowing these type of styrofoams.
Yeah, I was going to ask that.
So I have two minor things. In fourth, enforcement violations and penalties, we no longer have a health department nor a code enforcement department, so we should just make those division. We have a health division
Okay.
and or division of health and division of code enforcement.
Yeah, good call.
Or is it called code enforcement or property maintenance? Whatever it is, code enforcement? Okay. So it should be division of health and division of code enforcement. And then on 7th, effective date, assuming we pass this in March, I think we should just make it October 1st, as opposed to 180 days.
Yeah, I put that in as well.
That was like a
Okay, so
placeholder.
yeah, I just think we should make it October 1st so that it's clear.
Yeah, it's a placeholder.
That would give
since
us,
we didn't
it'll
know
be
when.
on the books in April, and then we have April through October 1st, gives us 6 months.
I'm fine with that. I had written down here that it was September 14th based on the 180 days.
Yeah, but
I
she
know
said
it'll be
first.
clean.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm fine with that.
I'm fine with that, too.
Yeah. Mr. Lindbergh?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, I mean, I think that we'll put these out there, and I think that, there may be things that the five of us up here are missing that people will bring to our attention and we can always consider, but it looks good to me.
This also gives time for education by the Green Team.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And inventory purchasing as well, which you mentioned somewhere in one of these ordinances, that people are purchasing inventory ahead of time, so half a year gives them time not to purchase new inventory.
Both.
Right, in both, yeah. The hardship clause under enforcement is in both ordinances.
And then just so I'm clear, since we're talking about the fine, so number 4, a fine shall be imposed for each day, and that will be $500 a day at that point. So the $100 fine, $200 fine, and the $500 fine, and any subsequent violation. So then the fourth one's a subsequent, that would just be $500 a day, right? Am I reading that right?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Any more questions for Ms. Adams? Any? No?
On the first one?
So I think we're good with the first one.
We're going to put it on for adoption at the next meeting?
Yes, we will.
Or for introduction, rather?
Introduction, rather.
First reading.
In March, we'll have that done.
So the second one is regarding plastic straws and utensils and any food accessory, as we've called it here, including condiments in individual packets, basically asking businesses to only provide them on request by the customer, as opposed to just automatically giving them out. So, any questions on that?
So I'd make the same comments about the Division of Health, Division of Code Enforcement, October 1st. I had in second B, distribution, sale, or use prohibited. This didn't make sense to me. It says a food provider shall be prohibited to ask a delivery customer if they want a single-use food and beverage accessory, but shall be prohibited from providing any to a delivery customer except upon...
Expect, actually. That's a typo right there.
Which one?
What Mr. DeLuca was just reading, it says expect.
Expect should be accept.
Right.
But I don't get the...
It's almost like the same
So
sentence.
the food provider cannot ask, so if I call up a Chinese restaurant, they can't ask if I want a package of duck sauce, right?
Yeah, I'm hearing you.
But then it says, the second part of that says, shall be prohibited from providing any to a delivery customer except upon customer's request.
Right.
So I don't understand this.
You say throw in some soy sauce and orange sauce, then they can throw, this is the way I understand it.
Yeah.
So they can't ask me if I want.
You have to tell them.
Right.
But they can, I'm the customer.
Yeah.
I say to them, and by the way, throw in some soy sauce and some orange sauce.
Right.
And then you would give me it.
But I can't, if you call me up, I can't say, do you want soy sauce with this?
Exactly. That's the way I read it.
Okay, that's the first part, right? I don't get the but.
But shall be prohibited from providing.
A food provider shall be prohibited, so that's a statement.
But should not be prohibited.
No, I think...
Right, that's right, it should not be prohibited.
But shall not be prohibited.
Right.
Right.
So I can't offer it, but if someone asks for it,
Shall not be prohibited
Right.
if in fact you ask.
Right, so you got
Okay.
not in
All
there.
right.
So that you would take out expect.
And they
No,
be accept.
Accept.
It should be
Correct.
accept, yeah.
So when we were talking about this, I thought we were including the ability for a food vendor to establish disposable utensils and sauce package in an area accessible to customers for them to self-select desired materials.
Oh, right, right.
So if they had a bin and you wanted to go over and take a package of soy sauce or a package of duck sauce or a spoon to eat your soup, that you'd be able to do that. They couldn't offer it over the counter. You couldn't put it in, you could have a separate, you could have it requested, or you would have a separate area where somebody could walk over and grab one of
No,
these things.
this actually says just the opposite. A food provider shall be prohibited from having
I understand
service
that.
areas. That's not what we,
This is in 2A.
basically,
Second A.
basically we were saying, and that's the discussion we had last time, was that they couldn't provide just a whole section where people could grab as many straws, and none of that could be, they could be requested, but not available for the taking. So it actually eliminates those places.
So I go to King's. They have a soup bar. And there they have, the container. It's a cardboard container. You put the soup in. They have a little plastic wrap of a spoon, a napkin, and you're saying they can't have that there.
It can be provided to them if they want it, but it
But
can't
there's
just
nobody
be...
there, it's a self-service, so no one's there. So how do you deal with that? Or if I go to the Chinese restaurant, Hunan Wok on Springfield Avenue, they don't give you anything. They have a little thing on their counter with sauces, with napkins, with forks, and I'm taking something. If I want to take one of those things, I can go over and take it and put it in my bag.
So that would be, in that case, an education, right? We have to teach that merchants and say, instead of having it over on the side, it would be where they would say, hey, you pick up your food, would you like whatever it is? Or you'd say, hey, can I have if it's behind the counter, hey, can I have, chopsticks or whatever?
So it might require changes from some of these businesses.
Yeah, and I don't support that because I don't understand. I understand not pushing it on people, but there are people who need a spoon because they're eating their soup in the car, and maybe it's not efficient for the business to have the spoons behind the table, or behind the counter, and maybe it's more cost-effective or better business sense for them to have a place where they can pick it out. When we were talking about this in the past, including with the Green Team, there were recommendations about setting up these self-accessible areas for utensils and packages. And I would like to see it in this ordinance. I think I absolutely agree not to give it out, not to put straws on the table when you're getting water unless you ask for it, or something to drink, but I think that it works now when people are doing either self-service, like I mentioned at King's, where the stuff is there and there's nobody even to ask for something. Or in the case of the Chinese restaurant where it seems to work. If you want it, it's there for you to use, and if not, it isn't, and it works for them. They can control the waste better by having people self-select. So.
Right. I'm not arguing with you. I understand what you're saying, but thinking about our intent with this, right? How does that help us? Because I see that bin, the self-service bin, as you say, and I've done this myself, admittedly. You grab a whole bunch of stuff, more than you need, more than one spoon. You grab like a couple or three, and you rush off, and you only use one, obviously, and that plastic ends up in the stream.
Yeah, it's a tough one.
And,
I agree with you.
You have the same situation at Dunkin' Donuts where they have the sugar packets.
Right.
Are you saying we can't give out sugar packets, or people can't take sugar packets? Or sweet and low instead of a sugar packet?
You're right. You're absolutely right.
And what's to stop you from saying to the person behind, well, I want two spoons and 8 packs of duck sauce?
Right.
Nothing.
Right.
Those are outlier cases, to your points. But I think, at the same time, this is making that inventory less accessible in the interest of the environment.
Right, but there's got to be, a balance here. And when we were doing all the bag ordinances and all this stuff, we do have an email from January of 2019 from our Green Team person who talks about what I just read about the disposable utensils and sauce packets can be set out in the area accessible to customers for them to self-select desired materials. So this was a proposal by our Green Team.
I understand that, but I don't know how well thought it was, is all I'm saying, because what's the difference between the proprietor behind the counter grabbing a whole bunch of stuff and throwing it in your plastic bag with your takeout and someone doing it on their own, their customer doing it on their own? There really is no difference. It's the same action, and it's the same material that ends up in our stream that we're trying to eliminate. I don't know if there is an answer.
Yeah, the same thing is, look at Wawa. All that stuff, salt and pepper, all that stuff is self-selected. There's a whole rack there. And I'm just concerned that, we have to strike a balance between people being able to do the business and what we're trying to accomplish.
Sure.
I agree, but a lot of those things like salt and pepper at Wawa and all that, that's all predicated by we can do whatever we want and give out as much as we want. It's not thought of by that. It was set up knowing anybody could take as much as they want. You know what I mean? It's not like with that mindset of...
Yeah, I think that when you have it out there, then you don't have to use employees to manage it, right? It's out there, but that leaves it open to excess use. Where if you have to manage the part of your operations, then theoretically I think it would reduce use because now you proactively have to engage to get the particular spoon or sugar pack or whatever the case may be. And I think that's part of this ordinance, as I understand it, is a way to reduce
that type of excess in our environment. So I'm not saying it's not a heavy lift, and I'm saying there could be a slight inconvenience to the consumer, because theoretically you can argue that it does, but the ordinance serves the purpose of reducing waste in our environment.
I think that's absolutely true, and I think there are times when people automatically put those things in the bag, but there are business models, and you can be sure that Wawa just didn't say, hey, let's just put a rack out there because we think it's easier. They've probably studied this and figured out the best way to do that, how they utilize the back. They would, right now they make those sandwiches back there. They would have to create an area for all these different materials and things like that. I just think we're imposing on businesses an extra step here, which can be satisfied with a lot of other towns around the country are using a self-select area. And I think you're going to run into problems with people wanting a pack of sugar or a stirrer on their own, and they're not going to remember to ask it behind the counter because they're used to going to an area. So I think we're going to disadvantage our local businesses by not having something in our ordinance that allows for the self-select area. I absolutely agree with you all about not putting it in the bag automatically. You get a soup and they throw a spoon in there. They shouldn't be able to do that. But if there's an area where they have spoons and you want to leave the counter, you pay for it, you leave the counter, you take a spoon, you put it in your bag, you go eat your soup in your car, I think that's fine. And because whether you ask for it or whether you take it, you're still using the spoon. So if you want to ban the use of plastics and all that, then we'll just say you can't have any plastics. That gets to the bottom line.
Right.
But I think we have to balance the need of the customer, the need of the business, and what we're trying to do here. And I think that just by limiting the ability of a business to automatically put it in a bag or automatically put it on the table when you get a drink, we will reduce the overall. But I don't want to negatively affect, as I said before, either our local businesses or some unintended consequences at a coffee bar or something like that, where you get your coffee and you go and you put your sugar and your creamer and all that kind of stuff in a separate area.
I have another thought on this, and it might end up being someplace in the middle, that they could still have self-service areas for that, but because of our concerns with plastics in particular, right now we're not banning plastic straws, for example, or plastic stirrers, all of which are a real problem, even in internal operations of bars and restaurants. The stirrers, clog up their drains and stuff. So would there be any interest in banning plastic stirrers and plastic straws so that if they do have the self-service area, it's, a wooden stirrer like Starbucks has, for example, or something more eco-friendly that's not going to be in the world for 400,000 years, but we can allow them to have the self-service areas, but I hesitate with that in large part because I picture a big thing of plastic straws and a big thing of plastic stirrers for people to grab. So we could address that to some extent by changing this slightly to ban plastic straws and plastic stirrers. Plastic stirrers, totally. There's no reason that they have to use those. But plastic straws only upon request. And maybe that would push some of the businesses who have the self-service areas to go to paper straws or straws made of non-plastic materials.
So to your point, Ms. Adams, no plastic stirrers, wood stirrers, or anything that's environmental friendly replacing what previously would not have been plastic straws or stirrers. It would have
like add a self-service, maybe, so that there might need to be a section if there's agreement on just banning plastic stirrers and banning plastic straws except on request, so that they would not be available at self-service areas, and plastic stirrers to stir sugar into your coffee and throw it away. I don't know, it's just something I was thinking at this.
I think that's a good compromise.
What do you think?
Anybody else?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a good compromise. I think Mr. DeLuca said it well. Look, we are trying to have an impact, but the impact is not the impact we hope to have. Ultimately, we're limited because we do have to balance things out. And, you know, the solution is not to have any of these products in the market. But we can't do that here locally. We can only do what we can do. So this is a step in the right direction, and, you know, I would be okay with that.
So, Mr. Desiderio, can we amend this ordinance to basically, we have it defined, the plastic stirrers in here, I believe, ban the plastic stirrers and plastic straws, except available on request, and with a sentence that plastic straws cannot, while they are available on request, they cannot be at self-service areas.
Right. And we'll talk some more, but effectively you're saying that single-use food and beverage accessories are really not going to be banned from being in...
Well, they're not banned now.
No, I understand.
They're just...
Well, a food provider should be provided from having single-use food and beverage accessories or offering them. I mean, that's my question.
Right, so let's be clear, because they're not banned, they're just banned to offer.
Okay.
So that, what we're discussing is how they get offered or where they get stored. So I can give you language that we have about setting up these accessory, and then I agree that if we want to say, if there's an accessory, there can't be plastic straws and plastic servers.
That's right.
Yeah.
That way, mostly would be salt and pepper.
Right.
Sugar.
We haven't talked about the little creamers, but...
So with these revisions, can we introduce this ordinance on, or we need to go back for discussion? I think we're everybody comfortable, so we can introduce it?
Yeah.
All right, perfect.
Yeah, and Mr. Desiderio and I'll exchange again, just kind of make sure before it goes out prior to the next meeting.
I mean, they're ready to go. Here's my question to you. Do you think you're going to get comments from various organizations and committees that are going to want to make suggestions before we spend money on publication?
It's a good question.
It depends on who's paying attention.
Well, maybe I think what you're trying to say is maybe we should solicit some feedback.
I'm simply saying maybe we should revise them and then circulate them for comments before you introduce. I just hate to spend money publishing them, and then people come in and have some good suggestions that you want to adopt, and then we have to go through the process.
They have gone to environmental advisory and green team chairs.
And also they have visited with, I believe with some SIDS as well. I think they did.
What we did in the ag ordinance is that we had it, before we introduced it, we had it, and then we sent the notice to all the businesses. And I think we could do something similar if we wanted to send a notice to all the food. We have all the food businesses because they register with the Division of Health. So we could send a letter before we introduce it and have them come to the next meeting and tell them it'll be discussed further at the next meeting. We can hear their comments, and then we can introduce it. At the 17th. No, the meeting in March, first meeting in March.
First meeting in March.
Wait a minute.
When is this meeting? This is the second meeting? Right, that's what I was So, yeah, I'm sorry, yes, the second meeting.
Discussion item for the third.
Right.
For just the second ordinance we just discussed.
Correct. First one's good.
The first one I think we can move forward with. I'd like it to be an October 1st start for both of them.
So to your point, I'm saying we had to change that number from 180 to something else.
It'll be October 1st.
Got it.
So there will be opportunity for comment on the second ordinance.
Correct. On March 3rd, is that the meeting?
So, excuse me, I'll be inviting the food, restaurants.
Anyone that has a food license with the Board of Health.
Okay.
For the 3rd of March.
Right. and we should get the word out to the city managers, but you're going to be inviting people directly.
And that would be circulating the two draft ordinances to this group.
No, only the second one.
Only one.
Yeah.
And indicating that public comment is welcome.
Yeah, you can inform them that the first one is on for first reading, so that they know that the polystyrene is about to be outlawed.
Right, and we can provide comment in person or in writing.
Since we're going to do the letter, we can send both ordinances out.
Sure. Yep.
Okay, so I'll get you that language tomorrow.
Okay. And Ms. Fritson will manage the letter to one. Okay, thank you.
I'll manage the letter with whom? Mr.
We're going to get the language, I believe, to Mr. Desiderio, who will provide it to you for the letter.
Sure.
Thank you. Thank you. Anything further, Ms. Harris?
Nope.
Thank you. Mr. Aruga?
Yes.
Number 4.
So these are the revisions to the plastic and paper bag ordinance. I worked with Annette De Palma, our Director of the Department of Community Development, and we've come up with the revisions. We brought it to the Code Committee. Code Committee supports the changes, and I sent it to everyone. Essentially, we removed compostable plastic bags altogether, and we've tightened up the definition of a reusable bag. A reusable bag is made of cloth or other non-plastic material with handles that are specifically designed and manufactured for multiple reuse. And we tightened up the definition of single-use plastic carryout bag, any bag made by way of plastic derived from either petroleum or biologically based source, such as corn or other plant sources, that is provided by an operator of the retail establishment to a customer at the point of sale. And then we just, that's just about it. So, and then we just remove the hardship because we already passed the hardship. So if this is good, we can introduce it on the 3rd.
Any discussion?
Good for me.
I just want to double check the reusable bag. Any bag made of cloth or other non-plastic material with handles that is specifically designed and manufactured for multiple reuse. It occurs to me that some of my reusable bags, like that I get at a grocery store, are not straight up plastic, but they're recycled plastic.
Right, we talked about that, and
Yeah, there's,
Don't want to confuse it?
Right.
Okay, fine. I get it.
Do I have that?
you should, but you will tomorrow.
Any additional comments, discussion? No? Okay, thank you, Mr. Aruga. Mr. Daffis?
Thank you, Mayor. As I reported previously, we've been doing a really good job at code enforcement in terms of increasing our rental registrations throughout the township. We're a little bit behind still, but we are catching up. And one of the things that we charge a nominal fee for is for missed appointments. This is when someone is scheduled, one of our inspectors to go out, and they go out and the person is not there. And it happens a lot more frequently than you would imagine. This is a fee that we, in comparison to other towns, we are nowhere near. We're severely undercharging, I believe. We're at $13 right now. We discussed this fee at code enforcement a couple of weeks ago, and we came to a consensus that we should raise the fee to $25, which is comparable to other towns in terms of what they charge for missed appointments.
Yes.
I agree.
Yes.
That was easy?
Is that something we have to do by ordinance?
Yes.
Okay, so that would be, I guess, something, yet another thing that will start and finish in March?
Introduction on the 3rd.
That's our 3rd of March so far. Okay, great. Mr. Limbrick, number 7.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is a request from the Chief of Police, who's conveyed a request from Seton Towing
Seton Towing has been our contracted tower for the Township of Maplewood for more than 42 years, so they've been doing the towing in Maplewood for longer than I've been alive. They are, the fees, the current towing fees that they are operating under was an ordinance that was passed in 1998, and it's been 22 years since those fees have changed. During that time, the costs of equipment, insurance, workers' comp, fuel, et cetera, have obviously gone up in the last 2 decades. So they are proposing, they've requested some changes to rates. What they have requested are that we have towing rates that are comparable to those in our neighboring towns of Milburn and South Orange. So our chief, Duvall, took a look at those towns and made some recommendations to us, which either he or I think have distributed to everybody, and you may have even gotten it twice. The recommendations are to take the towing service, which is currently at $70 up to $150, which would be the same as South Orange and Milburn, to increase the mileage charge from $4 to $5, again would be the same as South Orange and Milburn, to increase the outdoor storage fee to $40 per day, which would be the same as South Orange and Milburn. However, providing that no storage fees would be charged on Sunday, since the lot would be closed Sunday, so they wouldn't be able to get the car back on Sunday until Monday. Moving inside storage fees to $50, again, same as South Orange and Milburn. Road service fees from $45 to $100, again, the same as South Orange and Milburn. The administrative fee the administrative fee and the yard fee, there would be no change. Those are already consistent with our neighboring communities. Cleanup, moving that from $25 to $50. Winching would remain the same. The waiting fee per 30 minutes would go to $45. And the heavy-duty fee would go from $350 to $400, which is again the same as South Orange and Milburn. So, wanted to bring this here for discussion. This was already discussed at Public Safety Committee last week, where Mayor McGehee, Deputy Mayor Davis, and I had an opportunity to talk to Chief about this. We agreed that this was reasonable, particularly given A, the length of time since there's been an increase, and B, the fact that these increases would just bring us on par with South Orange and Milburn. So my recommendation, our recommendation as well as Safety Committee to the Township Committee would be to either amend the existing ordinance or pass a new ordinance, whatever Mr. Destario recommends, to change these fees going forward. And if we were to do that, I would just ask Mr. Desiderio to prepare that for March. So that would be number 4 for March. But there was a majority of us there at Public Safety, but I guess I sort of wanted to open it up for any other questions or comments people might have.
I agree.
Me too.
Okay. I think it's pretty simple then. So, Mrs. Desiderio, I think I sent you this tonight. I didn't know if you may have already received it before, but yeah.
I got it earlier tonight.
Okay.
I'll take care of it.
Thank you.
Any words?
Thank you, Mr. Limerick.
Thank you.
Number 8, future recycling plan. This will be pretty quick. Coming out of our conversation with Basso at the last TC meeting, a statement was made that if we were to consider switching from a single stream to a dual stream, source-separated recycling, that it would be some advantages, which would be including lowering levels of contamination, also some pricing as well, in terms of making some money versus spending money. And so understanding that we've just renewed with Basso for the next, year, theoretically, we want to start the process of potentially changing to, from a single stream to a dual stream or source separated recycling, and that would take a lot of education. A lot of municipalities already started to do that. I sent you guys some information where Hoboken has done that, and they're expecting a savings of nearly $250,000 from an annual perspective, and that's real money, as we just discussed the budget. So I just wanted to kind of get everybody's temperature, if I could start these conversations in engineering, public works and planning, and then also the green team environmental, to start looking at ways we could kind of pivot what we're currently doing with the single stream recycling.
I agree.
So I think we should look at this. I do have a question, a legal question. We just went out to bid for a single source.
Yes.
We wouldn't be able to change that until next year.
No, that's right.
Okay, just want to make sure, yeah,
This is
okay.
for 2021, but so say, I guess, March 1st, 2021, we're ready.
Right.
So essentially, you would have 4 pickups a month, 2 would be paper and 2 would be non-paper.
Right. And I actually started to solicit from some of my colleagues in other towns for specifications, so I've gotten some of them, and it's interesting because even some of the things that they're providing are the actual the disposals. So you know, we've had issues with the wind, so those are some of the things we're going to scrutinize and try to figure out overall what that could mean in terms of the service. So I'll be presenting those. I've sent those already along to the TBW staff and the engineering staff to start taking a look at the different options we have for the dual stream, or the different models rather. So
I would just add that one of the, in addition to dual stream, I think we also talked about whether we wanted to bring it in-house. So that should be another...
Whether we want to what?
Bring the collection in-house. Whether we want to buy trucks, hire people, because we're at the point now where it's almost economical to do it ourselves.
Yeah.
So I think as part of that conversation, we ought to, run numbers and do some evaluation of that.
And I think at some point we did sort some stuff here.
Yeah,
Because
I
we
was
have
going to
a
ask about
recycling-
this.
We have someone that is the lead person in the recycling, part of the union contract in there. There's someone that's designated as a recycling lead person. Coordinator. Something. Well, no, that's different. That's there is a recycling collection lead person who basically, you go out there and there's issues with recycling, they pick it up. But that used to actually be an actual department. When I look back at some of the older models, that there was some sort of sorting. I was trying to do some digging.
a lot of sorting.
We never picked up our own, we always outsourced it.
Right, but there was some sorting that was
We used to
happening.
have different containers.
Right.
When you brought it there was a green glass container, clear glass,
Right.
cardboard, paper.
Well, and then
So, yeah.
when they picked it up, curbside, it was colored glass, clear glass. They had stocks with separate,
So why did we go to single stream?
to increase the number of people who recycle for the most part,
Right.
mostly.
People would not separate it, and also they had a storage problem. And I think that it's something we're going to have to factor in when we think about dual stream, is the storage problem. Because now you're talking, instead of paper for a week, you're collecting paper for 2 weeks.
Right.
And, are we going to be providing the storage containers? Should we even look at that? That's another option. Do we want to provide storage containers where people wheel them out and you have automatic, which cuts down on...
Different trucks.
Yeah.
Different trucks.
Different trucks, so...
And
I
higher.
think we have a year now to really study this
Right.
and figure out what we want to do, because the state is going to do nothing.
No.
They're not doing anything about this. They're just putting their heads in the sand and hoping that, so at some point, some country's going to start accepting this stuff again, but that ain't happening.
There's
That's
also,
not going to happen.
No.
yeah, to your point of the paper, though, we have so much less paper than we did
That's
when
true.
we took it.
Newspaper.
Newspapers, there used to be a newspaper in front of every house every day. My house too, but I mean, we're aging out of the newspapers, but also the amount of mail, because emails replace a lot, there's not as much. So there's a big reduction, so every 2 weeks would probably would be okay, it wouldn't be a big burden. not like years ago when we had, so, I'm just, yeah.
So, thank you, everyone. We'll start this conversation tomorrow morning.
And we'll be able to get, we'll be able to get a lot of information at the zero waste thing as well on this
28th.
topic.
Yeah. Thank you. Okay, we're now at agenda item number 13, consent agenda. Get a motion?
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to move items 1 through 7, the consent agenda.
Second.
Any discussion? Ms. Whitson, please call the roll.
Ms. Adams?
Yes.
Mr. Davis?
Yes.
Mr. DeLuca?
Yes.
Mr. Lembrick?
Yes.
Mayor McGee?
Yes, thank you, Ms. Fritzen. We are now at agenda item number 14, public comment, our second public comment. Is anyone who would like to address the Township Committee? Seeing no one, we will close our second public comment. And our 15th and final agenda item, adjournment, I will entertain a motion. Move to adjourn. Second. So moved. Aye. 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 Thank you. Good night, everybody.
I have pre-inspection,